Alleluia. Om Mani Padme. Om. Allah.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and today we're speaking with Reverend J. Robinson. She's a minister of the Uniting Church, and she works a lot with young people and is a chaplain at the Monash University. Thanks for coming in, Jay.
Pleasure, Norm.
As we always do, the first part of this program is to look at spiritual background. Mm-hmm. What were you born as?
What was I born as? A little baby? No. I was put into a Presbyterian church.
Right.
And I say put in because my brothers and sisters and I were sent around the corner by Mum and Dad because it was nice and easy walking distance to Sunday school. So they'd send us off and they'd stay home. So that was, Presbyterian was what I began knowing and learning about. I also went to the Methodist Ladies College. Right. So there was some Methodists in there as well, which is probably all very good background for a Uniting Church person.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so that's where I started. And it took me, I'd say it took me quite some time to find what I would call a spiritual path. And probably even then I wouldn't call it a spiritual path. It was just the way I was going.
Yeah.
I would have been year 9 these days, and I was invited to go to a girlfriend's church, Baptist church, and be part of their girls' brigade.
Okay.
And one of the things you had to do to earn points for your team was to go to Sunday school. And at that stage, I was way too old to go to Sunday school. So I started going to our local Methodist church out in Glen Waverley and got involved that way. Started taking up leadership roles, involved with the junior choir, then with a singing group. Did some musicals there, directed some musicals there, all sorts of things.
What led you to, here we go, led you to leadership?
Yeah.
How did that arise?
I think I was willing to step up.
Okay.
I think that was probably it. Any church these days, and even a few years ago, are looking for young people to step up. Most of the churches in them, the ones who've been there for the longest are getting old and have heaps of experience but can't always do things. And people like to make space for younger leaders. So there was a minister there that was willing to give me an opportunity, and I stepped up and took it.
To be a leader, there needs to be some little things happening. Were you outgoing? What made you, or did you have a strong belief that you wanted to share it with people? Or?
I think I like to be involved, and I like to work with people.
Right.
The minister we had at Glen Waverley was someone who would sit alongside you and help you do things. He'd always challenge, but challenge within your capabilities, even if you didn't know you had them at that stage.
Good. Yep.
And so that leadership would have begun with little things like being part of a youth group, helping with Sunday school. Eventually I would do some, I was at MLC, I came out with a secretarial course, a certificate. So I would do some office work, and with my music background, be very much into let's look at new songs and what can we find. So all of those little ways.
Yeah. And so you say that there was no sort of particular direction, you just happened to be going there in that way. But you also went in another way, didn't you? As far as with twinkle toes and stuff like that?
Well, yes. After my husband and I moved out for a little while, got our own place once we got married, and then came back to Glen Waverley eventually because we couldn't afford to buy anywhere else. One of the things we had always said, because when we were going out, we'd go to the church dances.
Yes.
And we wanted to learn how to dance properly. And so we would say, we will learn after we get married. So we did. We went into local dance studio, had some special offers, so we went there, and from there went into metalwork, competitions, and danced together for about 10, 12 years, and were Australasian and South Pacific ballroom champions, competed overseas, and probably placed somewhere in the top 10 amateurs in Victoria. Had a ball. Hard work though.
It would be hard work, and the next question is probably going to be hard to answer. Was there a spiritual component in dancing? Did you find that it reached some level within you?
Good question.
I warned you.
I love performing,
yes.
which maybe helps with some of the background in here. And I would love performing and doing the dancing and feeling the music through that.
Yes.
And I think we connect spiritually in all levels, and music is one way you can do that. Yeah. I'd much rather dance than rehearse.
Yes, yes.
And that was good.
You touch an interesting point there, because you also did singing, didn't you?
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
So that perhaps says something about your personality in being able to communicate at that sort of a level.
I think for me, music and creative things are a great way for me to connect with other people, or open spaces that people can connect through. So that creative background is very useful, always, yeah.
And do you use that creative background in your current ministry? Is it something that comes forward?
Yes.
It does?
Yes, I've done some liturgical dance. I've trained liturgical dancers.
Right.
I'm very particular about choosing music for worship. Not only the right feel, but the right words. Right. And that talks of where I sit with my theology. Yeah. And also giving people, as I said, opportunities to connect.
Yeah. And opportunities to count 1 and 2 and 3. And we're out of time.
Yep.
We'll be back.
Okay.
We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Reverend J. Robinson, who's a minister of the Uniting Church. Jay, we were just talking about dancing, but we'll get off that now.
Okay.
I believe that when you were sort of in the process of formation to become a minister, you went through a lot of steps. What did they look like?
Well, it started really, I was getting more involved in leadership, lay leadership, so not actually being part of the church, but elders and things like that. And our youth minister left, and we had trouble finding another one. I was also at that time working part-time and then full-time for World Vision, helping them or run their volunteer program. And I remember driving home at various stages and having this voice in my head saying, you must apply for this position. And I had various discussions and arguments with that voice in my head saying I could not possibly apply for it. I had no qualifications. I had no time. It was my own church, and that's not what I'm there for.
No.
But that voice wouldn't go away. Or that feeling, however you want. But for me, it was voice.
Yeah.
And so I decided, well, I'd better talk to someone about this. So I made a time to have a conversation with our minister, and the voice stopped. So I'm sitting there, am I doing the right thing? Am I not?
Yes.
But the conversations, well, one of the things that came out was, what am I passionate about?
Yes.
And I was passionate about worship, about giving space for people to connect with God. And so from that, I started a course through correspondence on worship leadership. That eventually led to me picking up some subjects in a degree of theology. And I started what the Uniting Church call a period of discernment. And that's a time when you sit with a mentor and try to work out what it is that God is asking you to do. And I remember we talked about ministry, whether it's ordained ministry or whether it's lay ministry, and I ran as far as possible away from the ordained ministry.
Right.
I liked my house. I didn't want to have to move. I had a family. I'm not that good. I'm not that intelligent or academic. I couldn't do that. And I would admit that I'd look at my minister at church and he would be great. And I'd say, I can't do that.
Yes. Yeah.
And somebody had a conversation with me and said, well, you may not be able to do that, but you can do what you do.
Yeah.
And what you do is just as important. So that was a little bit of a turning point for me. So I finally bit the bullet and said, yes, I would apply to be a candidate in the Uniting Church. So there's, as you said, a number of processes. First process or first hurdle, you need to be approved by your church. So I had the Church Council and the Elders Council meet. They don't usually do that, and there were about 65 people. And I spoke for 45 minutes or so, and then they asked me any questions they wanted for the next 45 minutes or
Good
so.
heavens.
Yes, it was rather daunting, but and some interesting questions, I think, which said more about them than it did about me, but never mind. I got through that though.
Yes.
And that was a big point, because for me the whole journey was still, I don't know whether this is where God wants me to be.
Yes.
But the journey was worth doing.
Yeah.
Because the journey made me stop and think and put into words what I was feeling. It was a hard journey because I get very emotional at times when I talk about my faith. And so there were lots of tears left, right and centre. And there were people who didn't think tears were something that a minister should have.
Right. Yeah.
But we went through that. Went on to the next level, a presbytery. Again, very similar, 65 odd people in the room. You do your spiel, they can ask you anything. I got 2 questions. Yay.
Yeah, it's getting better.
It is. One on how I was enjoying my study, and the other was why I was applying to be a deacon rather than a minister of the word.
Right.
And that was a really good question. And I have to admit, at that stage, deacon was probably similar to what I was doing at World Vision by just being in contact with people. And it was just that little bit lower in my mind, not in truth, but in my mind, it was just that little bit lower than a minister of the word.
Yes.
Who I still struggled to recognise myself as, I would say.
Yeah.
But anyway, presbytery, that was all fine. And then we had the synod selection, and that's the final one that you get your big tick or cross for. Big weekend.
Yes.
It was a fishbowl. There were 8, 9 of us, with probably 15 people sitting around the edges of the room while they watched us interact in the middle.
Right.
Draining weekend. Very
It would
draining.
be. Yes.
Very draining. But I got through that with yes, you talk passionately about being a deacon. Everything else in you says minister of the word. Go away and think about it for 12 months.
Okay.
Which at least it wasn't no.
No.
And I think that was the big thing I took out of that.
Yeah.
And I still say to that, best thing they could ever have done for me.
Right.
It was really, really good. I spent 12 months looking at Minister of the Word and admitting that, yes, that's what I am.
Yeah, so you didn't just sort of drop into it, and I think that's important to recognise that people don't just drop into ministry.
Oh, no.
And they go through a process.
Yep. And it continues all the time, all the way through my study, and that's what surprised me, was the times you still questioned and discerning and deciding what you need to do.
Right.
So it doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't. And you've got, how do you get feedback? Like in that training process, it was clear where the feedback was coming from. But as you say, it's an ongoing process. Where does your feedback come from?
Well, in college, we had faculty advisors who would give us that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Outside of that, we all have supervisors.
Yes.
And I also have a spiritual director, which is something I swore I was never ever going to have, but now would not do without.
That's right. That's right. But of course, there's another thing which comes into this, and that's time, and we're out of it.
Okay.
We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking today with Reverend Jay Robinson, and she's a minister of the Uniting Church. Jay, earlier on in your conversation, you mentioned something about a voice, some sort of an awareness that you needed to go on this mission into ministry. Have you encountered that sort of
I've encountered it in different ways. The voice was a very clear way, but I've also I've encountered closed doors.
Oh, okay.
Where I have been determined to go in one direction, and all of a sudden that possibility has stopped, and I've had to go another way. And I can only look at that as though that's God saying, you weren't listening to me, I'm going to shut this door, and you will go through that one. I was going to be a paediatrician, absolutely.
Okay.
Except I got to, in those days, Form 5 and failed everything. So it wasn't going to work. But from there, the possibility opened up was my secretarial studies and my history, which I developed a love for. Like with my discernment, I said God was calling me to be a deacon. And he shut that door, but still left the other door open for minister of the word.
Yeah.
So there are times in that I really do believe that if I'm heading in the wrong way, God will point me in the right way. And it enhances my listening for that.
Yeah. That's the point. It's actually part of the way you live your life. It's become an integrated part
Very
of
much
that.
so,
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you had this interest in being a paediatrician. Now, you do quite a bit of work with youth.
I do, yes.
So is there a reflection of that?
I don't know whether it's a reflection of that. I think I probably would like to be an awful lot younger than I actually am, or I consider myself an awful lot younger than I actually am. But I also think young people need that opportunity and that support to step up and do things. I'm very passionate about the fact that if young people say they want to change things, they've got to get in the mix to be part of that change and learn how to change.
Right.
So I stand up for young people's issues. I'll make sure they're listened to, that they're more than just a token young person on a particular committee, that their value is there. But I also believe they're the church of tomorrow as well as the church of today.
Yeah.
And they can challenge us and help us think outside the square. And I just have fun with them. Yeah. So I love them.
Yes, well that's a critical part of it, isn't it?
Yep.
You're talking about change, which is clearly something that you've got within your focus. Religion tends to be, in many ways, unchanging.
Yep.
Much to its own cost, I suggest sometimes. What changes have you seen, or would you desire to take place in the process of being a minister of religion in your own faith? Oh,
I think the biggest challenge we have, and that links with the change for me anyway, is where are we going to be in the future, and what are we going to look like in the future? I had the joy of talking with a school principal a couple of weeks ago and saying, we're thinking about a faith community on campus here. What could that look like in the future? And that means the change is going to have to happen. We've got to, I think the biggest thing for the church is to really recognise and understand that God's working out there. God's not necessarily working inside the church buildings that we have. And our challenge is to get out there where God's working and jump in alongside and get our hands and our feet dirty. So, and for some people that's going to take a lot of change because we get very used to sitting inside our congregations and nurturing. And there are some congregations that are very inward looking, but there are also some that are extremely outward looking and are not scared to step out their door. And that's great. We just got to have a few more of them, I think.
I think that point, fear is one of the things that stands in everybody's way, really. But from the point of view of bringing, and you're passionate clearly about getting out there, getting your feet dirty, your hands dirty, and putting the message out there. So what's your favourite way of doing that? Where's the favourite where the nut cracks open for you and you say, oh, I'm putting it out there?
When I sit down and have a cup of coffee with someone.
Okay. Right.
One of the things I introduce myself at the university during orientation week, when I get the opportunity to go in front of each of the faculties, I say, I'm great for coffee conversations. And it's that relaxed atmosphere where you can really start to get some deep stuff.
Yes.
You know, you have your surface conversation and that's okay. And as that goes on, you have those deep occurrences where I say over and over again, what a privilege it is to be in ministry and to share people's journeys and hear their stories. They're the times that crack things open. Or if I've done a particular worship or I've created a space where people connect and you can see that connection. They're the places that sends shivers up and down my spine because I know God's there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, so it's like stitching God together through various people.
Yeah, yes. I got the joy to supervise a nursing master's student through one of her psychological units, which I said, I'm not qualified, but I said, remember, God is always in those conversations with you. And she was from PNG, and her whole idea of doing nursing was very different to our secular idea of nursing.
Oh, really?
And to have God in that conversation with her and a patient meant a lot to her. And that's what I see. God is in every conversation that I have.
Yes, and sowing the seeds, and that's a wonderful gift and a wonderful desire to do amongst youth. And we're actually running out of time, but we're covering a wonderful subject, wonderful topic. Would you be available to come next week?
Can do, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
You've been watching Harmony in Diversity, and next week we'll be speaking again with Reverend J. Robinson, and we'll be talking basically about chaplaincy and youth. Bye for now.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allah.